All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's 5:05 in Charleston, South Carolina, and my name is Gene King. I'm Senior Managing Director with Sequence Holdings, and I'm the Chairman of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce Southeast this year. For those of you that are here and are coming back for a third time, this is a series of webinars. And this series, this is the third part of our series of a 5-part webinar series. And this is brought to you by David Harrison and Partners, LLC, the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce, and InvestAmerica. It's an immigration webinar series, so thank you very much for attending. Today we're going to talk about the EB-5 program, including how the Joe Biden presidency, our president-elect, could possibly affect the EB-5 program. I've got a little bit of housekeeping for everyone to kind of get this going before I introduce our panelists. First, I've kind of already tested it, but I'm going to ask if anyone can't hear me or see me, please click the chat feature where it says all panelists and attendees, and someone will see that the moderator can't be heard or seen, but I'm looking over and nobody's nodding crazily to me, so I think we're okay. I'd like to advise you that we will be recording this event and that the event is also being broadcast live on Facebook. The link to the Facebook page will be shared to everyone shortly, so watch your chat area. The recording will be sent to you this week so you can share it with others who might be interested in learning about the EB-5 program, and a reminder that the previous 2 webinar recordings on E2 visa and U.S. immigration are available on the InvestAmerica YouTube channel and on our website, the InvestAmerica.com website. So don't hesitate to ask if you have trouble accessing either one of those webinars. A little bit more housekeeping. Please know also that if you have any questions during this webinar, there's a Q&A button at the bottom, not the chat button, but the Q&A button. And it will allow you to ask questions. You can ask the questions in Portuguese, English, or Spanish. If you want it anonymous, there is an anonymous button that you can click and make your question anonymous. So that is all available. If for any reason we run out of time and you've asked questions, and please don't hesitate while you're thinking about them to ask those questions. If we run out of time, we'll make sure one of the panelists, as the question may pertain to them, to get back to you with an answer to your question. So that's it for the housekeeping, and let's kind of move on and we'll get some introductions started. So we got a great program today, again, presented by the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce Southeast. It's hosted by InvestAmerica, the immigration consulting firm, and in partnership with David Harrison and Partners, LLC, an international immigration law firm. Again, our topic today is to discuss the EB-5 transaction, and it should be of interest to foreign families looking for a pathway to invest and live and work in the United States with a permanent green card status in the United States. For this discussion, and joining us today is a great team to guide you through the journey. I have been a moderator of this group in the past, and man, they just do an incredibly excellent job of being thorough in the discussion and really educating those that are watching. So that's it for the housekeeping, and let's kind of move on and we'll get some introductions started. So we got a great program today, again, presented by the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce Southeast. It's hosted by InvestAmerica, the immigration consulting firm, and in partnership with David Harrison and Partners, LLC, an international immigration law firm. Again, our topic today is to discuss the EB-5 transaction, and it should be of interest to foreign families looking for a pathway to invest and live and work in the United States with a permanent green card status in the United States. for this discussion. And joining us today is a great team to guide you through the journey. I have been a moderator of this group in the past, and man, they just do an incredibly excellent job of being thorough in the discussion and really educating those that are watching. So I look forward to everybody being a part of it. And without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start and introduce the panelists. Mike Zennick and Mila De Alano from InvestAmerica will be talking to us about certain items today, and David Hearson himself with Marcella Gaelic from David Hearson and Partners. I'd like to ask each panelist to introduce themselves by starting with, of course, their name and their company and position and responsibility and experience within the immigration industry, and specifically for this webinar, the EB-5 Green Card Program. Mike Zennick, why don't we start with you and take a couple of minutes to tell us about InvestAmerica.
Great, thank you, Gene. My name is Mike Zennick. I'm the President and CEO of InvestAmerica. I founded the company in 2012, having started in the EB-5 or in the immigration space in 2010 with another company. I'm also a CPA and investment banker. I'm also the managing principal of Sequence Financial Specialists, which is the broker-dealer that InvestAmerica transacts all of its offerings through. You'll hear a little bit more about that later on and what importance that is to investors in the EB-5 space or some of the other investment categories that we operate in. InvestAmerica is an immigration consulting firm. We ultimately do due diligence and represent a variety of EB-5 projects. We represent E2 applicants that are looking for the acquisition of a franchise or business to work in the United States. And ultimately, we pride ourselves on working directly with families, making sure that their journey is as smooth as possible as they immigrate to the United States. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, and glad to have you join us today.
Thanks, Mike. Great introduction. Mila, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Thank you, Gene. So my name is Mila De Alano. I am with InvestAmerica. I'm the Global Development Coordinator. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody again. This is our third episode. I work, I work mostly with South America and Spanish and Portuguese speaking clients. So I'll be on the background today. I'll leave the light to shine and Mike and David. But if there is any questions in Portuguese and Spanish, I'll be in the background and I'll be happy to help. Have a great webinar. Thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Mila. David Hearson, would you mind introducing yourself, sir?
Sure, thank you, Green. Well, greetings everyone from sunny Southern California.
Yeah.
It's great here, and I can recommend people coming to the US and Florida and California, good places. I'm David Hearson. I'm the founder and managing partner of David Hearson and Partners, LLP. And we've been doing immigration law in the United States since 1980. In 1990, the EB-5 law was passed, late 1990, and in the first weeks of 1991, I filed one of the very first cases of EB-5 in the country, and we had the person back in less than 6 months with an approved conditional residence. So my experience goes back from then and has only grown and increased over all of this period. We've basically seen every aspect of this law and seen the business go through valleys and peaks. And at the moment, we're waiting for a new peak and we're waiting for some change. But it's still a very exciting area and very useful for people wanting to come to the US permanently. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, David. Marcella, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, thank you, Gene. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcella Gaelic, and I am the Director of Business Development for Latin America at David Hearson and Partners. I'm also a Brazilian attorney and a business immigration specialist. And like Mila, I'm going to be here available to answer any questions you might have in Portuguese or Spanish. So feel free to use our chat feature. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and use that and we will be happy to answer. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. Back to you, Gene.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your introductions. So those of you on this webinar today, I think you see and understand that we have some of the best when it comes to a competent team of professionals to talk about immigration and specifically EB-5. Today, we pursue the details of the EB-5 program and really concerning the purpose of the EB-5 program and the requirements, costs, processing times, investment benefits and risks, importance of project due diligence. Even InvestAmerica is going to talk about the EB-5 project portfolio that they currently have, multiple projects, and either during, not last and not least, but how Joe Biden, the President-elect's presidency may affect the EB-5 program, and we've got some folks here to talk about it. So what I'm going to do now is start with David Harrison. And David, thank you again for being with us today. I can't tell you how much the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce appreciates what you do for this chamber and what we're trying to do to educate folks. So please go ahead, if you would, and give us your overview of the EB-5 program, basically its definition, requirements, and the timeline. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Gene. It's a good question, and it's very topical for the day. I want to thank Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce for this invitation and the cooperation of InvestAmerica. EB-5 has been a specialized area within our office since inception, as I mentioned earlier, and its definitions and practice has changed over time. So I'm going to give you the basic requirements. It's very complex and lengthy, but basic requirements are sufficient for you to get started. And if you decide to go forward, we'll be happy to fill in any of the blanks for you. Next slide, please. So the visa itself is a permanent resident visa or green card, which allows the individual who gets approved to enter the country with immediate relatives, spouse and children under 21 and unmarried, and to come here on a permanent basis. The investment is $900,000 in special areas called targeted employment areas, or $1.8 million for the rest of the country. One of the major requirements that is in fact called an employment creation visa in the statute is to create 10 full-time jobs for qualified US workers. Next slide, please. So there's a process that is followed, and we have form numbers and that type of thing on the screen. I don't want to try and confuse you with those numbers, so I'll use them as little as possible and try and tell you what we're doing. So to start with, you need to find a project that has the information that you need, and you have to gather your own information to enable the attorneys who you select to file the form I-526, which is the initial application to immigration to obtain eventually conditional resident status. So you file this form I-526, and you have to wait for US CIS processing time. Now, this time has fluctuated from as low as 6 months, which was many years ago, until now, when you don't expect anything to happen for a couple of years and maybe even 3 or more years. You also have to wait after approval for the available quota. So countries that are falling behind in the quota, that's the availability of visas, is at the moment Vietnam and China. So part of the filing is once you get the approval from USCIS on this form I-526, it goes to consular processing. That's a US consul in your country, home country or country of residence, who will then get you to fill in a form DS-260. This is done online, fees are paid, and you will be called to a personal interview at the US consul, which could be in an embassy or could be a freestanding consulate in your country. With adjustment of status, this means that you as an individual, being the beneficiary of an approved I-526, are currently in the United States in legal status, say as a student or an H-1B or one of the other alphabetic visas, and therefore you'll be entitled to file for the adjustment of status, which includes the filing for a travel document and work authorization. The adjustment of status is currently taking more than a year after filing, and again, you have to wait for visa numbers, which doesn't apply to any countries other than I mentioned before, China and Vietnam. Once you've processed through the consular proceedings, you'll get a stamp in your passport. It allows you to enter the United States within a period of 6 months. The principal must enter first or together with family, and the family either enters with the principal or after the principal. Family cannot go in first. On date of arrival, you are now admitted to the US as a conditional permanent resident, or on the date of approval of the adjustment of status, you become a conditional permanent resident. This is a condition good for 2 years, where you have all the rights and obligations of a green card permanent resident holder, but it has a date by which you have to file an application to remove that condition, and that has to be between the 21st and 24th month in the 3-month window to get the condition removed. This is a Form I-829, and once approved, you will get a full green card. That card should be valid for 10 years, and it's only the card that then is not valid longer. It's not the status, so renewal is more of a formality. That process takes several years, and that's as presently stands, but we've seen an improvement in the last few months. In that application, you have 2 major proofs. One is that the jobs were in fact created, so 10 jobs can be allocated to you, the investor, for your project, and that your investment has been placed and not paid back to you in any amount. Even if the whole investment has been lost, you are still qualified, but you cannot get any of the money back during the conditional resident status. Next slide, please. So the jobs, 10 full-time qualified US employees. The full-time employment must be verified, and there's a government program which we recommend very strongly gets used called e-verification, and that e-verified job gives you confirmation that the person you're hiring has been approved by the US government as being lawfully in the US and entitled to employment. You don't want to come to your condition removal stage, give your 10 employees, and find that from the records, immigration has 2 of them who are not legal, therefore you only have 8 qualifying employees. Case fails. Then you've got the regional center type jobs versus the direct jobs, which we had earlier, whereby you can use indirect and induced job creation. So this is done through an economic analysis, which establishes what the impact of that investment is on the location in the creation of jobs. There's no actual head count, it's just the formula that is applied. The creation of these jobs must be within 2.5 years of the approval of the Form I-526. That's the first approval by immigration before you go forward with consular approval or adjustment of status. And at that point, you have to show that your 10 jobs have been created. There are certain exemptions. There's time to do it. If you don't fully get them all done at the I-829 stage, you get a limited extension based on circumstances. And so this is all possible if you don't reach the full 10 on the date required. Next slide, please. Critical components of the EB-5 I-526 petition is that the funds must be shown with detailed documentation to have come from a lawful source. The sources can be multiple. The sources could be in the US or out of the US or both. You just have to show that this money is owned by the investor. However, it has arrived in the investor's hands. So this could come from savings, from pension plans, from share options, any of these type of things that you might have, bank loans, gifts of funds. However, you'll need to prove that the funds from those third parties were derived from a lawful source. So additional documentation is required. With loan funds, when you borrow the money, you no longer have to prove that you give security for that loan and then prove that the security was obtained by lawful means. This is a recent case. We're talking about weeks ago, so it's a much easier proof. But you still need to show, if it's not a renowned World Bank, that the bank obtained the funds from a lawful source. And then we have the path of funds. That path of funds shows exactly where the money came from and how it moved along the chain to get to the actual project. This can be must be an unbroken chain and must be very detailed. Next slide, please. There's certain benefits of what we call here new enterprise, which we can also call the direct investment. And the other side of the chart, the regional center, which might be a combination of direct employment and indirect employment. Any sort of mix is fine, as long as you can show the 10 employees. The job creation needs to be same slide, please. Thank you. The job creation needs to be direct jobs in the direct side, and on the other side, as mentioned, you can use these economic formulae to achieve that job proof. Management, generally, you will have to manage the day-to-day operation of your direct investment, although it can be done by a group of people, and then it will be similar to the regional center side, where you don't have to manage day-to-day. It's as close to a passive investment as you can come within the law, and you have certain responsibilities which are acceptable to the EB-5 program. Processing time, they're about the same. It fluctuates, sometimes a couple of months in either direction based on which you use. Some years ago, the direct investments were far ahead of the regional center ones, but that's no longer the case. Residents, well, if you're running your direct program personally, you need to live near the program or you can't run it personally. Whereas with the regional center program, it doesn't matter where you live because you don't have to be at the site of the job at any time. Next slide, please. There are 10,000 EB-5 visas under the quota system. This is not a lot of visas, and it's made worse by the fact that dependent spouse and unmarried children under 21 are counted against the 100,000, which means there are only really about 3,500, that's 3,500 actual investors, plus their families add on. The filing of the I-526 creates what's known as a priority date. So it puts you in the line. Like if you go into a bakery and you take a number off the tag and then they'll call your number, it's the same concept. At the moment, the whole world, except for China and Vietnam, are current, so you have no concern about the priority date. It's only if things retrogress that that date becomes relevant to you. The issue is shown on Biden's website.
Dave, if you don't mind,
yes.
let me jump in here just a second before you get started on that, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. Please, I think I've got
everyone that's on this webinar, this is a fire hose of information, so don't forget you have access. Oh my God, you're just doing such a great job. I can't thank you enough for all the information. And now we're kind of coming out of the discussion of what is an EB-5 and really have some thought-provoking things that are about to happen here. So what I'd like David to do now is transition into this slide and kind of tell us what's going on with the EB-5 program today, and what do you think about President-elect Joe Biden's thoughts about immigration in the past and where he's thinking now, if anybody knows, and what your thoughts are when it comes to the President-elect, the new administration, and the EB-5 program with immigration. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Very good question. Thank you. I'll just flip that over for a moment. The Trump administration favored EB-5, whereas they were totally restrictive in all the other policies over the whole of the 4 years. So if Trump did come in, we had a reasonable expectation that EB-5 would be left alone or even encouraged. On the Biden side, if he comes in, and it appears on the face of it that he probably will, he has expressed a pro-immigration mindset, that he is going to do a full immigration program reform. And in that, EB-5 would come for discussion. It's not specifically mentioned along the way, but it is an issue that we feel will go a long way with him because of it being a job in employment creation visa. It also is required to stimulate the economy, and it's foreign direct investment coming into the US. All three of these items being at no cost to US taxpayers. So we will find this strong pathway coming through for foreign nationals, and the people called DACA, or the American Dream families, apparently who've been in limbo all of these 4 years, will be given some kind of path towards becoming legal and eventually citizens. Apparently, I've not seen it, Joe's website shows immigration priorities, and as I said earlier, modernizing the system, welcoming immigrants, and urgent action to undo a lot of the immigration restrictions. Thank you, Jean.
David, thank you. That's all I can say. What a great, for all of you on the webinar, what a great introduction to the who, what, where, when, how, and why about EB-5, and also a little political feeling. And I thank you for this time. Understanding these timelines and requirements is just such an important part to the whole project. And now what we'd like to move to is, how do I select a project? So with that, Mike Zinnick with InvestAmerica, remembering that InvestAmerica has 100% I-526 and I-829 approval rate. So I don't know how you get any better than that. So with such a great team to understand how to seek out and find a good project that is going to work for the investor. Mike, what I'd like for you to do is just tell us a little bit about InvestAmerica's diversification in portfolios for qualified projects, a little bit about what the difference is in exemplar approved and non-exemplar approved, and a little bit about InvestAmerica's mission, your success and history with what you've done to help families come to America, immigrate into America, and to help them along this pathway into America, especially utilizing the EB-5 program. Mike Zinnick, thank you for being with us with InvestAmerica, and help us out a little bit here.
Great, thank you, Gene. I appreciate that. And as it shows here on the slide, our mission is to exist. We exist to guide, protect, and support families as they immigrate to a better life in America. And that's a thing that we really enjoy, and really sort of our mantra for how we treat investors and their families. And we want to make sure that their journey is protected along the way. Everything we do, from evaluating a project as well as to guiding them through the process, allows us to really help them. Next slide. So here's a quick history. We've been doing EB-5 and other immigration-related investment activities since 2010. We've represented several hundred investors and their families from over 20 countries. As being mentioned, we do have 100% approval rate for people that filed their I-526s and their I-829s. And our focus is really, again, on presenting the best projects that have been through a rigorous due diligence process and are presented in such a way that helps the investor to make some good decisions that will ultimately help them achieve their goal of getting the green card and moving to the United States. So as I mentioned, we do the due diligence that we do is in line with the U.S. securities laws, and making sure that the the real estate developer, making sure that the owner of the project, making sure that all the parameters of the transaction are done properly. We do background checks on management. We evaluate the financial projections. We look at the history of the company and the regional center as well. We are regulated by the SEC, and that means that we have a duty to the investors to make sure that we present information that's factual and also protect their interests from the moment they invest until the moment that they exit the investment, which could be several years down the line. And we also mentioned our 100% approval rate. Again, our experience, we do, our focus is, we want to make investors feel comfortable. We want to make sure that they're getting good information. So we offer a free consultation that demonstrates all of our projects, helps them to understand the difference between each of them. Some of them have different benefits versus others, and sometimes different things are important to different people. So sometimes investors are looking for different characteristics on a project, whether it's location or size or track record or annual return, those kinds of things. We do a free consultation to compare all of our projects, as well as if they're looking at another project, we'll also put those parameters in our comparative chart and provide a free consultation to those investors. And as I mentioned before, we provide constant support. So when somebody invests in an EB-5 project that we've represented, we make sure that the project itself is providing them with the information they need from start to finish. So, getting project updates, getting financial information, making sure they're getting paid their interest on time, and any problems or issues, we are here for the investors. Here's a quick snapshot of a very small example of some of the projects that we've had represented in the past that we've been very successful at. All three of these projects were completely subscribed, dating back to 2015 through the November of last year. These projects are all in New York, but we represented projects from all over the country. These are all very high quality projects in New York. And so far, every single one of the investors in the 300 Ashland project have been, their initial I-526s were approved, and most of them have now applied for their I-829s. 325 Kent, same thing, all the investors have been approved I-526s, and probably won't be able to file their I-829s for another 6 to 8 months. And the 260 Kent project, we just finished in November of last year. No approvals back yet, but nobody's been adjudicated yet, so we're still waiting on that one. But it was structured very similarly to the other projects. So our focus, again, high quality projects, high quality developers, high quality regional centers. So I think Gene.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to be interrupting for just a second. I'm gonna bring us into this next section. First of all, great experiences. What a journey InvestAmerica has had. And what I'd like for you to do now is kind of tell us ways InvestAmerica and your team assist the investors and their families when it pertains to this program. And as you're talking about that, if you'll kind of blend into some of the projects that we talk about in your portfolio now. So kind of help us to understand the portfolio and working with the families, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, due diligence, that's key. We also don't just try to shove projects down investors' throats. So we want to make sure that we are looking at what their needs are. We have, as I mentioned, the free consultation. We have in-depth conversations with them. Obviously, in pre-COVID times, we travel all over the world and meet with investors and their families. When they come to the United States, we'll travel to meet them wherever they are, to either do site visits, help them to meet the developers, the regional centers, and also to make sure that their specific needs for their specific families are matched up with the projects that we represent. Sometimes that is location, sometimes that is different risks that they perceive as risks versus other projects that may have different risks. So really just trying to match up, and that's part of what we do as a broker dealer. That's what broker dealers typically do. We match up investments that we have with the investors and their desires, what their investment strategies are, what they're looking for in a project. We have to abide by what's called regulation best interest, which is a new regulation that we have in the United States to make sure that we are recommending investments that are suitable for that investor and is serving their best interests. So that's kind of what we do. And again, we're there from start to finish. We probably put in more time than most in interacting with people, making sure their questions are answered, making sure all the due diligence that they want to do on a project is completed. So now I guess I'll move into the portion where we talk about some of our investments, some of our projects that we have available. First one is a exemplar approved project in Las Vegas. That's one that we've represented now for several months. We launched it probably 2 or 3 months before the new regulations went into effect in November. So we didn't have a whole lot of time to promote it, but we got some good interest, got several investors into the project. The project itself just got finished. The picture you see here is an actual photo of the resort and casino. It opened on October 28th. It's been doing extremely well the last few weeks. It's probably the talk of Las Vegas right now. The benefits of this, as from an EB-5 perspective, is the EB-5 portion of the capital is very low, which means the return of capital is much more likely than projects where EB-5 is a larger portion. The senior debt piece was put in by a syndicate led by Credit Suisse Bank, so international, global banks and investment banks were involved in this. The developer themselves put in $463 million of their own money, in addition to bridging the $98 million of EB-5 money, which will be replaced as EB-5 money comes in. Large job count, 81 per investor, over 65 jobs per investor have already been created. So construction risk is eliminated because the building's built. Job creation risk has been eliminated because all the jobs have been created. That's been certified by an economist. Next slide. We also represent Lightstone Regional Center. We are one of many agents that are in the market right now with this project. The benefit that we provide, both on this project or for this project as well as the other projects that we're getting ready to see, is coming through us. As I mentioned before, we have the duty and responsibility as a registered securities firm to protect the rights of the investors from the moment they invest until the moment they exit, whereas other agents don't have that responsibility. They're there to help make the sale, and then they typically, don't stick around for that. So it's helpful to investors to, even though they may see this from other people, to interact with us, because you're getting kind of a whole lot more value for the investment as well as the administrative fee that you're paying. This particular project is getting ready to start construction. It's going to be in New York City. Again, EB-5 capital is a very low portion of the capital stack. Lightstone has a very good track record of returning money to their investors, as well as putting together some very nice projects in the New York area. Lots of jobs per investor, over 100 per investor, so the job creation count is covered. This one has not started construction yet, so it will take a few years to build, and 2023 is the targeted completion date for this one. And going back just to circa, we're the exclusive representative for that. So anybody else that's out there selling circa Las Vegas comes through us, just to clarify. Okay, we can move on. Stanzion 25, which is at Mount Baker Station, Seattle, Washington. Again, another completed project. They just finished the second phase of it a few weeks ago. The first building that was finished a few months ago is 90% leased. The second building is now being leased. It's a multifamily residential development in the heart of Seattle, including a sort of an area that's being completely redeveloped and redesigned. So lots of development dollars, lots of economic activities going on there. Large job creation, and EB-5 is still a relatively small portion of the capital stack. It's an exemplar approved project, which along with circa, as we mentioned before, is also exemplar approved. That means that USCIS has reviewed an application, or either an investor-less application or investor application, and said this project meets all the requirements. So that is, can be helpful to investors when they are filing their petition to either help it get adjudicated faster, and also give them some reassurance that the project itself is going to be approved, and just eliminates one of the areas of potential rejection of an I-526 petition. Next slide. This is one we can't talk about in a lot of detail, mainly because of the way it's promoted, and the securities regulation exemption that it's recorded as, which is a 506B, meaning we can tell you a little bit about it, but in order to give you more information, we have to see some information on you first to make sure that you're suitable and appropriate for the investment. So what I can tell you is it's just about finished completion. It's an infrastructure project. It's based in Texas, and EB-5 capital, 6% of the capital stack. So that again really helps in the opportunity to return capital. And it's a regional center that has done a lot of projects and is a very experienced regional center with a very good track record. And lastly, Pine State Regional Center, their Big River Steel Phase 2 project, basically the expansion of an existing steel mill that has generated, a low of $50 million of earnings before taxes and depreciation. So profitable already for a couple of years. They're doing a large expansion of that. The project is about 80% finished. It's got adequate job creation coverage. EB-5 again, small portion of the capital stack. You can see sort of a theme here of what we represent. We want the developers and the owners of the project to have a lot of skin in the game, a lot of their own money at risk, either more so than the EB-5 or certainly alongside the EB-5. One of the key features of this one is because it's an infrastructure project, it has been approved by USCIS for expedited review of their exemplar filing, which they sent through a couple of months ago, and also could be a precursor for investors getting their petitions reviewed sooner than everybody else. No guarantees on that. It's certainly not an automatic, but it does have the ability to potentially do that. So, Gene, I think that's. I'll turn it back to you.
Yep, I thank you very much for that understanding of really what a portfolio means to an investor when they're looking into EB-5 as a potential outlet. So that was incredible. Before we go on, I think opinions at this level of y'all's expertise is really important. Would you mind, before you finish your presentation, basically giving the folks here a little bit of understanding from your point of view about President-elect Joe Biden and what his impact for the EB-5 program could be? Just another view.
Sure, sure. I basically support everything that David said about the potential for for EB-5 under a Joe Biden presidency. I think the bigger issue, or not issue, but the other factor that weighs into this is what goes on with the rest of the federal government, and really that it plays a lot toward the perception of our South American investors from people that we've talked to regarding this, and that's the balance of power. So Joe Biden is a Democrat. The House of Representatives, one House of Congress is controlled by the Democrats, and right now the Senate is controlled by the Republicans. So there's a balance of power, and whenever you've got at least one of those factions that is independent or representing the other side, that's a good balance for the country. The issue that I see with there's a special election that will be happening in the beginning of January, and if that goes the Democrat way, which would mean that the House, the Senate, and the presidency would be Democrat, one of the fears that I've heard, whether it's founded or not, but it's certainly perception that we're hearing, is because of some of the push from some factors of the Democratic Party to move toward either a more socialistic, more socialism type of bent, scares a lot of South Americans. That's the reason why a lot of people are coming here, is to get away from those kinds of things. Venezuela, Argentina, places like that. So I think it would. In my view, I think it would benefit regardless of who the president is. Which again, I do think that a Joe Biden presidency would probably make things a lot smoother in perception, better from around the world. I think from a perception of whether or not there's going to be a balance of power really rests with how that election turns out on January 5th. So that's my perception, again, based on feedback I've heard from people that are coming to the United States to get away from socialist governments, hoping that things don't, continue to push toward that here in the United States.
Great. Thank you. I tell you, David, if you don't mind cutting your camera back on and unleashing that mighty microphone, I can't thank you guys enough. This is incredible information, and we're an hour-long webinar. We got about 9 minutes left. I don't know. I'm gonna look and see if we have some questions and answers, but we did have a couple of questions that I was asked to make sure I present to you fellows. So, David, I got one I'd really like to ask you, if you don't mind. When you're looking at and discussing these different types of visas that we've started out this webinar series with, E2, EB-1Cs, and you say, I want to go ahead and get started. I want to get to America, the United States, with my family as quick as I can. Is there a way to blend EB-5 in with something else to make things happen faster, or is there only one way, so to speak?
A great question. Just before I start, a little trivia. I happened to be visiting Washington, D.C. and the Senate in 1990 when the EB-5 was being debated, and the two senators debating was the late Kennedy and the current Vice President Biden. So just a little trivia for you folks. So he was in it from the beginning. He knows what it's all about.
Sure.
So back to, thank you. Back to your question. Yes, so as you heard from my timeline, the EB-5 takes quite a lot of time before you can arrive in the US. So yes, you can try and use different categories of visa to enter the US earlier. In this case, there are several visas you could use. You may be here on what's called an H-1B, working as a specialist. You may be in the US as a student on a long-term study. Then, more importantly, going back to our previous presentations, the E2 visa, which is a treaty visa, which Brazil does not have such a treaty, but anyone with a third country treaty qualified passport can do an E2 visa, which you could be in the US in less than 6 months in a much smaller investment, while you're waiting for your bigger EB-5 investments to be approved. Thank you, Gene.
Yeah. So I've got a few minutes left. I'm kind of scanning through some of the questions, to see what Mike, I got one. While choosing a project, you know, if you're looking at EB-5 and I'm trying to make a decision on, while choosing a project, in your opinion, what are the key factors one must really consider about the project when you're considering of making a final decision? Is it industry? Is it job creation? Is it location? Is it developer success? How do I make a final decision on which transaction to invest in? Because they all have the same dollar.
Sure. Well, it's a very good question. A lot of it depends on the investor and what they're seeking, what they're looking for. And really it kind of goes toward what we look at and what we focus on. From a job creation perspective and the projects being approved, you know, that used to be a bigger issue many years ago. It's not so much an issue now. Everybody kind of knows what they have to do to get the jobs created. And that's typically not a modern day EB-5 issue. So my view is that focus on how much money does the developer have in the program or in the project itself. If they have very little, or if they're relying on EB-5 to start the project, those are two key things. You know, are they putting a lot of money of their own at risk, and are they going ahead and making sure that the project's going to get built, bridging the capital themselves, bridging the EB-5 portion themselves, and putting, you know, making sure that the actual jobs get created and the project gets built. Those are, in my mind, two of the very key factors. There's many others, but those are the key factors in my view. And again, as you saw as a theme, as I was going through the projects, having EB-5 be a small portion of the capital stack is always beneficial to the investor and increases the likelihood that they'll get their money back.
Cool. Thank you. David, we've got about 4 minutes left. I've got a couple more questions, but David, if you don't mind, let me ask you this. Yeah, let's talk about the origin of the funds for an EB-5 investment. We know the source and path of those funds for an investor uses the EB-5 investment is very important, and that requirement is important. So does it matter where it comes from? How precise do you have to be when you're thinking about sharing the information about the origin of the funds? How important is that? Can the funds already be in the United States? Tell us a little bit about, so those folks that are still on the webinar can hear, what about the funds?
Right, I'll try and squeeze into the 1 minute an hour's presentation. Here we go.
Thank you.
The funds have to be legally obtained. They can be obtained from just about any source that is legal. The documentation has to be very specific and very accurate. If there's any break in that documentation, you have to get declarations that are credible. Otherwise, immigration will say, we do not accept that the money is lawful. So where it comes from can be loans, gifts, sale of shares, anything that you can think of that would be legitimate, an inheritance. But if you have an inheritance, you've got to show that the deceased obtained that money legally. Selling real estate, if it's an ongoing chain of real estate over 20 years, they want to know where the money came from to get the first piece of real estate to bring it up to today, including additional monies that were put into that real estate as we went along. And I think that's about as much as I can get into the minute.
So thank you. Okay, guys, you did a great job. I got a little bit I have to do here at the end to kind of pull everybody together at the end, but you know, what a great lesson about the EB-5 process and what happens. Our next webinar, the 4th webinar in our series of webinars, will be on the EB-1C green card program. So really look forward to those of you that might have an interest in continuing this webinar series. Put that on your date. December 16th will be the EB-1C program to discuss how to move to the United States with the green card and purchase a business. So on behalf of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce Southeast, InvestAmerica, David Hershen and partners. I want to thank each and every one of you for attending today's webinar and our series of webinars. And don't forget to like our respective company pages because it helps on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Share the videos of this event with your friends and associates. And also, this is really important. At the conclusion of this webinar, as soon as we sign off, a pop-up will come onto your computer asking you to just answer 3 or 4 or 5 questions to help us to understand how we did today, how to make things better. Take you a couple of minutes to answer the questions. So again, I thank everybody for being a part of this. Ladies, gentlemen, what a great event, and goodbye. See
Thank
you
you,
on
everyone.
the 16th.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
You.